Hello, brothers, and welcome to Sigma Old Man channel. The world will break your heart 10 ways to Sunday if you let it. This isn't just a line from a movie, it's the brutal reality Sigma males wake up to every day. They don't start off cold, they're made that way, one disappointment at a time. You see, there's a reason why lone wolves don't run in packs. Experience has taught them that the greatest betrayals come from those they once trusted. Here's a fact. Psychologists say emotional detachment is often a response to repeated disappointment. Now, if that's the case, Sigma males could be the poster boys for learning the hard way. They enter the world with a sharp mind and a loyal heart, only to realize that most people prefer shallow connections and convenient friendships. So what happens when a man who values depth, loyalty, and honesty keeps running into deception, disloyalty, and nonsense? He shuts down. Not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. It's a slow process, almost unnoticeable at first. One betrayal here, another letdown there, a few ignored calls, some unreciprocated efforts, and before you know it, the warm, thoughtful man who once cared deeply becomes emotionally untouchable. And the worst part, by the time people notice the change, he's already too far gone. So how does it happen? How does a Sigma male go from someone who genuinely wanted to connect to someone who wouldn't blink if the world burned? Well, brace yourself. Because what you're about to hear is not just another overused sob story. This is the devastating reality of how Sigma males slowly become cold-hearted. Number one, they become cold not because they wanted to, but because the world gave them no choice. A Sigma male doesn't wake up one day and decide to be cold-hearted. It's not some dramatic transformation fueled by revenge or bitterness. It happens slowly over years of watching people reveal their true nature. At first, he's open-minded, willing to connect, and even hopeful that genuine bonds exist. He gives people the benefit of the doubt, believing that if he treats others with loyalty and honesty, they'll do the same. But the world quickly proves him wrong. He learns that most friendships are built on convenience, not real loyalty. People stick around as long as he's useful, entertaining, or beneficial to them. The moment he stops being those things, he becomes irrelevant. Messages go unanswered. Plans get cancelled, and people who once swore they'd always be there disappear without explanation. At first, he makes excuses for them. Maybe they're busy, maybe life got in the way. But after the same pattern repeats itself enough times, he realizes the truth. Most people never cared in the first place. Romantically, it's the same. He might start off as the guy who gives his all, the one who believes in love, commitment, and deep emotional connection. But he soon discovers that modern relationships are often built on games, ego, and fleeting attraction rather than real substance. He sees how easily people replace each other, how loyalty is conditional, and how the one who cares less always has the upper hand. Eventually, he stops playing the game altogether. He withdraws emotionally, not because he doesn't want love, but because he refuses to be another casualty of mindless dating culture. Even in family dynamics, he sees how selfishness prevails. He watches relatives turn on each other over money, pride, or meaningless grudges. He realizes that just because someone is blood-related doesn't mean they'll be loyal or trustworthy. Over time, he starts prioritizing his own peace over maintaining forced relationships. This isn't a choice he makes lightly. It's not that he doesn't feel, he feels everything. But he's learned that showing those emotions only invites manipulation, betrayal, or disappointment. So he does the only thing that makes sense. He stops showing them. He stops trying. He stops expecting. He builds an emotional fortress so strong that even he forgets what it's like to let someone in. And by the time the world notices the change, it's already too late. He's not cold by nature. He was made that way. He was made. Number two, their kindness is seen as a weakness, so they stop showing it. A Sigma male doesn't begin life with a hardened heart. He starts off with the belief that doing good will bring good in return. He helps without hesitation, stands by people when they need him, and offers loyalty without expecting much in return. At first, he doesn't see this as anything extraordinary. To him, it's just the right thing to do. But as time goes on, reality teaches him a brutal lesson. The more kindness he shows, the more people see him as someone they can use. He notices how his efforts are rarely appreciated, only expected. He lends a hand, and people take the whole arm. He gives second chances, and they take advantage of his patience. At first, he tries to brush it off, thinking maybe he just encountered the wrong people. But then it happens again, and again, until one day he realizes that this is not an accident, it's a pattern. The worst part is watching how people respect those who are indifferent but walk all over those who genuinely care. He sees how those who demand, manipulate, or play mind games often get what they want, while those who act with sincerity are dismissed, ignored, or exploited. He learns that being the nice guy doesn't earn him loyalty. It earns him more responsibilities, more burdens, and more people who assume he'll always be there, no matter how little they give in return. So he makes a decision not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. He stops offering help unless it's truly deserved. He stops going out of his way for people who wouldn't do the same for him. He learns to say no without explanation, to detach without guilt, and to walk away without looking back. What once came naturally, kindness, generosity, emotional support, slowly fades away until it becomes something he only gives in rare, carefully chosen moments. People start to notice the change, but by then it's too late. They wonder why he doesn't care anymore, why he seems so distant, why he no longer bothers. But they never stop to consider how they played a role in his transformation. He didn't become cold-hearted by choice. He became that way because the world made it clear that kindness, when given too freely, is nothing more than an invitation to be used. Number 3, they give people chances until they don't. A Sigma male isn't someone who cuts people off at the first mistake. If anything, he gives more chances than most. He doesn't operate with blind judgment. He observes, analyzes, and waits to see if people will do better. He understands that humans are flawed, that mistakes happen, and that nobody is perfect. So he gives people opportunities to prove themselves. He forgives, he overlooks, and he keeps the door open longer than he probably should. But there's a limit, and once it's reached, there's no going back. At first he tries to rationalize betrayals and disappointments. Maybe it was unintentional. Maybe they'll change. Maybe they just need time to grow. But experience has taught him that most people don't change. They just get better at pretending. He notices the patterns, the apologies that mean nothing, the excuses that pile up, the cycles that repeat over and over. Each time he gives someone another chance and they fail him again, a part of him shuts down. A layer of emotional armor thickens. Eventually he reaches a breaking point where he's done. Not in an angry, explosive way, just in a calm, permanent way. He doesn't announce it, doesn't argue, doesn't seek revenge. He simply walks away, and when he does, there's no coming back. That door isn't just closed, it's locked, bolted, and forgotten. The person who once had endless patience is now unreachable, and that's what people don't understand. They assume they'll always get another chance because they always have in the past. But once he decides he's done, there is no discussion, no second guessing. No nostalgia pulling him back. It's not that he enjoys cutting people off. It's that he's learned his worth. He refuses to be a revolving door for those who don't value him. By the time someone realizes they've lost him for good, it's already too late. And the irony? The same people who took his patience for granted are often the ones most shocked when they realize he's no longer willing to give it. But by then, they're nothing more than a lesson he won't repeat. Number 4. They see how easily people move on without them. A Sigma male doesn't start off detached. He values deep, meaningful connections and invests in people with genuine intentions. He believes that loyalty and emotional depth should mean something. But over time, he learns a harsh truth. People move on with alarming ease. One day, he's the person they rely on, confide in, and claim to value. The next, they're perfectly fine without him, as if he was never there. It's not just that they leave, it's how effortlessly they replace him. At first, he doesn't want to believe it. He assumes maybe they're just busy, maybe life got in the way, but then he sees it for what it is. He was only valuable as long as he was convenient. The moment he stops putting in the effort, stops being available, or stops playing his role, he becomes an afterthought. They don't fight to keep him in their lives, don't check in, don't even seem to notice his absence, and that realization is devastating. He starts questioning everything. Were the connections even real? Did they actually value him, or was he just another placeholder, another source of comfort until someone better came along? The answer becomes clear when he sees how quickly they laugh with someone else, share their secrets with a new person, and carry on as if he never existed. No mourning period, no effort to fix things, just a seamless transition, like swapping one character out for another. This is the moment everything changes. He stops taking people at their word and starts watching their actions. He stops believing in emotional depth unless it's proven. He stops making the mistake of thinking he's irreplaceable. If people can move on from him that easily, then why should he waste energy caring? Slowly, he builds emotional walls, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. If they can move on without hesitation, so can he. By the time people realize they lost a genuine, loyal, and deeply intelligent man, it's already too late. He no longer sees the point in reconnecting or revisiting what's already dead. The man who once believed in unbreakable bonds is now emotionally ruthless, not because he wanted to be, but because the world showed him that in the end, most people were never truly attached to him in the first place. Number 5, they witness the fake loyalty of friends and family. A Sigma male doesn't enter the world expecting betrayal from the people closest to him. If anything, he starts off with a quiet but firm belief in loyalty, especially from those he considers family and friends. He assumes that the bonds he builds with people mean something, that the time, effort, and loyalty he invests will be reciprocated. But time proves otherwise. And the most painful lessons don't come from enemies or rivals. They come from the very people he once trusted without question. He watches family members prioritize greed, ego, or convenience over genuine connection. Relatives who once acted close turn distant when there's nothing left to gain. Favors become forgotten. Sacrifices go unnoticed. And when he finally needs something in return, he's met with silence or excuses. Blood, as it turns out, is only thicker than water when it's beneficial. Friends follow the same pattern. The ones who once swore they'd always have his back vanish the moment life gets difficult. He sees how easily people switch sides, how quickly they forget past loyalties, and how effortlessly they replace him when a more convenient option comes along. It's not a dramatic betrayal, it's worse. It's the slow, steady realization that most people only stick around for as long as it serves them. He doesn't react with anger or confrontation. He doesn't beg for explanations or try to change them. He just observes. And with every disappointment, every instance of fake loyalty revealing itself, his expectations shrink. He stops assuming people will do for him what he would have done for them. He stops believing in lifelong bonds or unconditional loyalty. He stops putting faith in words and only trusts actions. This changes him permanently. The man who once believed in deep connections now expects nothing from anyone, not in a bitter way, but in a cold, calculated way. He doesn't get his hopes up, doesn't rely on people, and never assumes anyone is truly in his corner. If they prove themselves over time, fine. But if they don't, he won't be surprised. He has learned that in the end, most people's loyalty is nothing more than an illusion that fades the moment it's inconvenient. Number 6, they see how easily people throw away deep connections. A Sigma male doesn't start off detached. He starts off believing in the weight of real connections. He assumes that when a bond is built, it means something, that the loyalty he gives will be returned, and that people value depth the way he does. But reality smacks him in the face. Again and again as he watches people throw away meaningful relationships like they were nothing. At first he tries to justify it. Maybe they were going through something. Maybe they didn't realize what they were doing. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding, but then he sees the truth. It's not about circumstances. It's about how disposable people have become to each other. A decade-long friendship can be erased over a minor disagreement. A deep emotional bond can be discarded for temporary excitement. A relationship he thought was solid can be forgotten overnight with no real explanation. And the worst part, people move on like he never even existed. He watches as those he trusted cut ties without hesitation, often over the smallest inconvenience. He sees people betray lifelong friends for social status, leave partners who stood by them for fleeting attention, and abandon connections that took years to build for something as trivial as boredom. This isn't just one experience. It becomes a pattern. And with each instance, something inside him changes. He stops investing emotionally in new relationships. Not because he doesn't want connection, but because he's seen how little it actually means to most people. He no longer believes in grand gestures of loyalty or promises of forever. He knows now that for many, loyalty lasts only as long as it's easy. The moment things get tough, inconvenient, or slightly less exciting, people are gone. This doesn't make him bitter, but it does make him cautious, ruthlessly so. He doesn't rush into friendships. He doesn't trust words, only actions. He doesn't pour his energy into people who haven't proven themselves over time. And most of all, he keeps his emotional distance, because the truth is simple. If people can throw away deep connection so easily, then he refuses to be the only one who ever cared in the first place. Number 7. They realize that no one actually cares unless they're needed. A Sigma male doesn't assume the worst about people right away. He starts off believing that relationships, whether friendships, family bonds, or even romantic connections, are built on genuine care. He puts in the effort, offers support, and is there when people need him, thinking it's mutual. But over time, he notices a pattern that's impossible to ignore. People only seem to care when they need something from him. When he's useful, when he's giving advice, solving problems, providing emotional support, or simply being available, people are around. They appreciate him, they check in, they make him feel like he matters. But the moment he steps back, the moment he needs support, or even just stops being immediately useful, he sees a different reality. The calls stop, the messages dry up. The people who once leaned on him so heavily don't even notice he's gone. At first it's disappointing, then it's infuriating. But eventually it just becomes clarity. He realizes that most relationships aren't built on genuine care. They're built on convenience. People don't truly care about him. They care about what he can do for them. And when he's no longer serving a purpose in their lives, he becomes invisible. This changes him permanently. He stops assuming people's kindness is real. He stops believing in sentimental words and empty promises. He learns to observe, to test, to see who's actually there when there's nothing to gain. And as expected, the numbers shrink. Most of the people he once considered close vanish when they realize he's not there to serve their needs. And he lets them go without hesitation. This is why Sigma males detach. They don't do it because they hate people. They do it because they refuse to be a tool for others to use and discard. They would rather be alone than surrounded by people who only remember them when they need something. By the time the world realizes what they've lost, it's too late. The Sigma male has already moved on, leaving behind only one lesson. If someone truly cares, they won't only be there when it's convenient. Number 8, they stop feeling guilty for cutting people off. A Sigma male doesn't start off cold-hearted. He gives people chances, overlooks mistakes, and even tolerates things he probably shouldn't, all because he values connection. When someone betrays him, disrespects his boundaries, or constantly takes from him without giving anything in return, his first instinct isn't to cut them off. It's to question himself. Am I being too harsh? Am I expecting too much? Should I give them another chance? At first, he convinces himself that walking away is too extreme. He tells himself that people make mistakes, that maybe they don't realize what they're doing, or that cutting ties completely is too final. But over time, he sees the brutal truth. Every time he gives a toxic person another chance, he pays for it. They don't change, they just learn how to manipulate better. They take advantage of his patience, mistake his kindness for weakness, and continue draining him emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even financially. Eventually, he reaches a breaking point. He realizes that the guilt he feels for cutting people off is nothing compared to the damage of keeping them around. He sees how much energy he's wasted on people who never truly valued him, how much peace he's sacrificed trying to keep relationships that should have ended long ago, and how much lighter his life becomes when he finally removes them. Once this realization hits, he stops hesitating. He no longer entertains toxic behavior. He doesn't explain himself. He doesn't argue. He doesn't wait for the right moment to walk away. He simply cuts people off and moves on without a second thought. And the best part, he doesn't feel guilty anymore. He sees it for what it is, self-respect. People might call him cold, heartless, or ruthless, but he doesn't care. He knows what they really mean is, I can't manipulate you anymore. And he's perfectly fine with that. By the time most people realize they've lost him, it's already too late. He doesn't look back, doesn't reconsider, and certainly doesn't reopen doors he's already closed. Because once a Sigma male learns that cutting toxic people off is a form of self-preservation, he never hesitates to do it again. Number 9, they see how shallow most human connections really are. A Sigma male doesn't start off as someone who keeps to himself. In fact, he genuinely craves deep, meaningful connections. He wants conversations that go beyond small talk, friendships that aren't just based on convenience, and relationships that actually mean something. But over time, he starts noticing something that makes him withdraw. Most people are perfectly fine living on the surface. He sees it in how people interact. They talk, but they don't actually listen. They ask how you're doing, but only because it's polite, not because they care about the answer. They maintain friendships, but only as long as there's entertainment, drama, or mutual benefit involved. The moment things require depth, real understanding, or effort, they check out. And the worst part? They don't even realize it. To them, this is normal. This is enough. At first, he tries to play along. He engages in the mindless conversations, forces himself to care about the trivial things people obsess over, and lowers his expectations, hoping to fit in. But every time he does, he feels like he's suffocating. The interactions feel empty, forced, and utterly pointless. He finds himself drained by people who never go beyond surface-level thinking, who avoid real conversations because they're too deep, and who treat relationships like entertainment rather than something meaningful. Eventually, he stops trying. He stops expecting depth where there is none. He stops wasting energy on people who are content living on autopilot. Instead of forcing himself into shallow social circles, he retreats into his own world, a world where he can think freely, focus on things that matter, and invest his energy into something that actually fulfills him. People might call him distant or antisocial, but what they don't understand is that he's simply lost interest in interactions that offer nothing of value. It's not that he doesn't want connection, he just refuses to settle for something that feels hollow. And since deep, meaningful relationships are rare, he'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who don't even realize how shallow their interactions truly are. Number 10, they get tired of proving their worth. A Sigma male doesn't walk into the world expecting special treatment. He knows that respect is earned, so he puts in the effort. He's reliable, competent, and fiercely loyal to the people he cares about. He never asks for recognition, he just does what needs to be done. But over time, he realizes something frustrating. No matter how much he gives, it's never enough. People take his strength for granted. They rely on him, benefit from his presence, and expect him to always be there, yet rarely acknowledge his worth. He notices that the moment he stops over-delivering, the appreciation fades. If he doesn't constantly prove himself, people start acting as if he never mattered in the first place. It's a brutal realization that in a world obsessed with status, performance, and what someone can offer, a man's worth is often measured by what he can do, not by who he is. At first he tries harder. Maybe if he just gives a little more, shows up a little stronger, or remains patient a little longer, people will see his value without him having to fight for it. But that never happens. The more he gives, the more people expect. The moment he steps back, they replace him without hesitation. That's when it finally clicks. He's been playing a losing game, so he stops. He stops proving himself. He stops bending over backward to be seen, appreciated, or respected. He lets his silence do the talking. He lets his absence remind people of what they took for granted. Instead of explaining his worth, he disappears and watches as the same people who never acknowledged him suddenly realize what they lost. But by then it's too late. This shift doesn't make him bitter, it makes him indifferent. He no longer seeks validation because he knows the right people will recognize his value without needing constant reminders. And for everyone else, he simply doesn't care. If they couldn't appreciate him when he was present, they don't deserve him now that he's gone. A Sigma male doesn't wake up one day and decide to be cold-hearted. He's made that way by experience. He starts with good intentions, believing in loyalty, deep connections, and mutual respect. But the world teaches him differently. He learns that kindness is mistaken for weakness. Loyalty is rarely reciprocated, and most people only care when it benefits them. Slowly but surely, he stops giving what is never valued, stops proving himself to those who will never appreciate him, and stops entertaining relationships that only drain him. By the time he fully embraces this mindset, there's no going back. He no longer feels guilty for walking away, no longer seeks validation, and no longer wastes time on shallow connections. He operates on his own terms, detached from the emotional games most people play. His absence becomes his greatest statement, and his silence speaks louder than any argument ever could. People will call him cold, distant, or ruthless, but he doesn't care, because in the end he's not heartless, he's just done with the nonsense. If this video hit home for you, don't just walk away in silence. Hit that subscribe button and join the tribe. Like the video if you got value from it, drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And most importantly, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep the conversation going because trust me, this is just the beginning. Stay sharp, stay untouchable, and I'll see you in the next one.